It's time to meet the Mets. Meet the Mets. Everybody, it's time to meet the Mets. Well, the Mets have had some great times and some bad times. The great times was that, after 7 years of wandering in the MLB darkness, it took 7 seasons, I mean, the Mets pulled off one of the biggest shocks ever to win the 1969 World Series. They were close to winning the 1973 World Series, and they had won the 1986 World Series. But what if I told you that the Mets could have been the big dynasty everyone was talking about in the 1980s and not the Oakland A's? What if I told you that the Mets made a giant, colossal boo boo that cost them a trip to a World Series in the late 80s, a couple years after winning the World Series? We are focusing on the 1988 Mets. I know you can say the 2007 and 2008 Mets deserve some merit because they both choked divisional leads and didn't get to the playoffs. But when you are expected to do well, you put up a century's worth of wins and you just can't beat a ragtag team, then you're really screwed. Anyway, this is a story about the 1988 New York Mets. You've got Jeff Diamond, you've got one man, you've got a hat, a bat, and that's definitely not all. You got the bleachers, got it from spring to fall, you got a dog, a drink, and that umpire's call. What do you want? Let's play what if. Okay, okay, Cutter, do some what ifs. Okay, okay, Cutter, do some what ifs. So let's talk about the New York Mets franchise history quickly, as quickly as possible. So the New York Mets were born in 1962 only because the Dodgers and the Giants had left town. To explain, the Dodgers and Giants were never always in LA and San Francisco, respectively. They were in Brooklyn and Gotham. The Dodgers, yeah, Dodgers were in Brooklyn, and the Giants were in Gotham. So when they left in 1957 to go to California for the 1958 season, New York only had one baseball team left, the Yankees. So it'd be easy to cheer for the Yankees. After all, they were a dynasty in the 40s and 50s. But a lot of teams and players did not want to cheer for the Yankees. They felt that the Yankees were just ruining sports. So they basically said, well, New York's screwed. So with the city of New York not getting another baseball team, they decided to put in what they call the Continental League. And William Shea made it an 18 league that had cities that did not have Major League Baseball yet. Major League Baseball scoffed at that idea at first, but then when everything grew apart, especially with Toronto getting a team possibly in the Continental League, then baseball decided to finally decide we don't need 16 teams, we need more teams to make more players in the league and make it more competitive. So they decided to add two teams to the AL for 1961, which were LA, or to put it bluntly, the suburb of Anaheim, to be the LA Angels, and also the Washington Senators. Although there was another Washington Senators team, but that Washington team was sold to Minnesota, so they would be playing games in Minneapolis. So Washington was given one of the expansion teams as a thank you for being brave and all that. In 1962, the National League would add two teams to their eight-man thing. Houston, putting baseball in Texas for the first time, and New York, more appropriately Flushing. Ironically, the stadium, Shea Stadium, would be in Flushing, where Robert Moses, the New York City comptroller, wanted the Dodgers to play, even though the Dodgers said we're the Brooklyn Dodgers. So the Mets were born out of necessity. Unfortunately, though, they had a terrible expansion draft, and it showed, only winning 40 games out of 160, with, of course, two being rained out. So the Mets, for the longest time, till 2024, were the losingest team in Major League history. That's now the Chicago White Sox, although the Mets still hold the record for most losses by a National League team, obviously. The Mets drafted well. They put their prospects and did everything right. And by 1969, even though they were given 100 to 1 shot to win the National League, they somehow not only finished in the top half of the NL. They won the NL East. Of course, that was created because with another great expansion in 1969 and adding Montreal and San Diego to the National League, the National League decided with 12 teams, they needed to split them up into 16 divisions. So the Mets won somehow, thanks to Chicago being cursed by that black cat in front of the Mets dugout. The Mets would win the 1969 World Series, shocking Baltimore, who were supposed to be this powerhouse. And then the Mets, 4 years later, in 1973, shocked everyone by winning, only being a few games above 500, winning the NL East and shocking the Reds in the NLCS to make the World Series against the Oakland A's, who were trying to go back to back. And the Mets actually did have a 3-2 series lead, but blew it. So regardless of that, the Mets were decent. And by the late 70s, they were a shell of themselves. Donald Grant basically traded away Tom Seaver because of Dick Young and that newspaper columnist who was being a dick. And they also made a few other trades. So the Mets were just sloppy. But they drafted well. And by the 80s, they were back to being the dominant team. 1986, they went to the World Series 1 year after narrowly losing the NL East to the Cardinals. So they went to the World Series, were down 3-2 to the Red Sox, came back with that Game 6 win, in which somebody by the name of Mookie Wilson hit that ground ball straight at Buckner, who was hobbled right through his legs. We got a Game 7, which the Mets won. Of course, we'll talk about 1988, but then the Mets slumped. Unfortunately, drug problems would hurt a lot of their players. So, the Mets were just a shell of themselves. They got back to respectability by 2000, making the World Series, but losing to their crosstown rival Yankees. The Mets had a couple of choke jobs in the late 2000s in the division and all that, including the last season ever at Shea, but we're not talking about that. The Mets have been decent. And heck, they picked up Juan Soto in the richest MLB contract of all time. So time will tell if the Mets can actually make the World Series this time. But anyway, let's talk about the 1988 Mets. Why should we? So here's the stuff about the 1988 New York Mets. Their 27th season, they won 100 games. They won the NL East like they should have. And would lose to the Dodgers in a close 7-game series of which they should have won. So anyway, Jesse Orosco was made available by the Mets in a trade to the Dodgers, which was shocking because of how good he was in the postseason, especially in 1986. The Dodgers would send Jack Savage to the Mets. Oakland would send Kevin Tapani to the Mets as a prospect. The Dodgers would send Bob Welsh and Matt Young to the A's, and the A's would send Alfredo Griffin and Jay Howell to the Dodgers. Funny enough, those 4 players would meet each other in the World Series in real life, so it was weird seeing Bob Welsh having to pitch against the Dodgers, the team that he was decent for in the early 80s, and Jay Howell pitch against the A's. Of course, Howell later on would be an NLCS GOAT, if you will. Rafi Santana was traded to the Yankees to make way for Kevin Elster, and Randy Milligan was traded, but for Mackey Sasser, who was the backup catcher, but later on would have troubles throwing the ball back to the pitcher, thinking he was going to bobble it. And the Mets did take part in the first ever night game at Wrigley Field, which was shocking, of course, because, everyone says it was August 8th against the Phillies that the Cubs did so. But that game did not last 5 innings, so that was an unofficial game. So, of course, that game was on NBC. So the Mets put up some fantastic numbers with 100 games, with Pittsburgh and Montreal also being 500 or above. But that was it. The whole NL East just didn't seem correct and all that. So as you can see, yep, and against opponents. As you can see, the Mets were fantastic against every team, minus the Giants. They were 4-8. Everyone else just did well, especially against the Dodgers. So anyway, the Mets made no major moves in the regular season, but their roster looks good. Raga Aguilera, David Cone, Ron Darling, Alberto Fernandez, Dwight Gooden, Roger McDowell, Randy Myers, Bobby Ojeda, and David West with the infinitive ERA in the World Series in 1991. Actually, Gary Carter was backed up by Mackey Sasser, if you will, Wally Backman, Kevin Elster, Keith Hernandez, Greg Jeffries, Hojo, Dave Magadan, and Tim Tuffle, your infielders. Outfielders were led by Lenny Dykstra, Lenny Basili, Kevin McReynolds, Joe Strawberry, and Mookie Wilson. So that looked pretty dominant. So the Mets looked fantastic, especially in September and October when they were 22-6. Postseason, we'll talk about that. Of course, the starters Carter, Hernandez, Backman, Johnson, Elster, McReynolds, Dykstra, and Strawberry doing their jobs and all that. Other batters, Mookie Wilson put up 112 games off the bench. Mackie Sasser 60, Masili 68 off the bench. So that looked pretty good for the team. The starting pitching, Dwight Gooden, 18 wins. He could strike out everyone. Ron Darling was a finesse guy, 17 wins. David Cone, 20 wins coming out of freaking nowhere, as this was his first full season with the Mets. And NL hitters just couldn't believe their luck when David Cone put up 20 wins against them. Ojeda and Fernandez were good on the back end. Pitching wise, you got Randy Myers and Roger McDowell sharing the closing duties on that. Orozco was OUT. So, yeah, the pitching staff was huge because without Orozco, they thought they were nothing. Anyway, the NLCS started off game one. The Mets scored 3 in the ninth off of Jay Howell and the Dodgers bullpen to win 3-2. In game two, the Dodgers would come back with 5 runs off of David Cone in the first few innings, and they held on. Tim Belcher with the win, Alejandro Pena the save. So then game three came in. It was a magical game three, depending on which side of the ball you were on. Because game three was also the one that saw Jay Howell. If we can get this down. Sorry, there's a problem here. Why is my mouse not going down? Because game three has to be talked about. There we go. All right. So anyway, Dodgers won, lost the game. The Mets won 8-4. Jay Howell came in to pitch in the ninth and got in trouble because of pine tar on his glove. So he was thrown out for the rest of the NLCS. Game four saw the Dodgers and Mets battle it out until the ninth. And Mike Scioscia came in off of Dwight Gooden and hit a 2-run tater tot. Tie the game, and Mike Scioscia does not hit home runs that much. So then the Dodgers scored in the 12th, and Orel Hershiser famously told Tommy Lasorda, "I'll be your Jay Howell," and said he would pitch the 12th inning for the save, and which he did. He got it. And then in game 5, the Dodgers didn't quit. They just put 7 runs on the board against the Mets quickly and got themselves into a game 6. So anyhow, the Dodgers won game 5. Game 6, the Mets scored early on Tim Leary to win 5-1. The fourth at game 7. And the Mets had to tell themselves, we have to win game 7. After all, it is the Dodgers. But somehow, in some way, their bats went very silent. They scored 6. They couldn't score off of Orel Hershiser, who was Orel Hershiser in 1988. 59 consecutive scoreless innings. I mean, how could you beat that? So anyway, the Dodgers won the NLCS. So now what happens if the Mets and A's met in the 1988 World Series? Let's find out. So this is it. The 1988 World Series. You got the Oakland A's and the New York Mets playing each other if the Mets had won that NLCS. The A's went with a 3-man rotation, so will the Mets. The Mets go with Dwight Gooden for game 1 because of the fact that Ron Darling did pitch game 7. So it will be Gooden, Cone, and Darling, the 3-man rotation. Oakland starts with Dave Stewart, just like they did in real life. So let's get the ball rolling here on this game. So the Mets strike first, game 1. Jose Canseco led off with a single to make it 1-0. Then McGuire hit a double to score Canseco to make it 2-0. The Mets would score twice as Darryl Strawberry hit a 2 RBI triple in the bottom of the 5th, score Elster and Backman. So they ended up tying the game. And then in the bottom of the 6th, Gary Carter hits a single to score Hojo, and that was it. The 9th inning, the A's used everything they could. Polonia did steal second, but Lansford grounded out. So the Mets survived 3-2. And I think Gooden pitched the whole game, if I'm not mistaken. Let's take a look. Yeah, Gooden pitched the whole 9 innings, so that was kind of weird what he did. And then Dave Stewart pitched the first 7 innings. Cataract came in for the 8th. So time to change pitchers. It will be David Cone for game 2. Oakland goes with their game 2 starter in real life, Stormy Davis. No, it's not that woman Trump was with. Regardless, Oakland would score late to win 5-4. The Mets did score first on a Mookie Wilson single, and then Strawberry tater tot it in the bottom of the third to make it 2-0. And then the Mets would score on an RBI double by McReynolds, making it 3-0. So it looked like the Mets were looking good. But Curry Lansford gets an RBI ground out 3-1. But then the eighth came. Roger McDowell came in. Canseco would single. Dave Henderson would hit a fielder's choice. McGuire would single. Steinbach walked. Javier hits a single to score Dave Henderson. Walt Weiss walked to score McGuire. And then they decided to go with Dave the Cobra Parker to pinch hit. He takes ball four, making the Mets go with Terry Leach pitching. Lansford would hit into a fielder's choice. And then they got the third out. But the A's came storming back in the top of the eighth. So, yeah, that's impressive for the A's. And then Eck came in to pitch. Jeffries came in to pinch hit, but struck out. Backman grounded out. And Strawberry would strike out as well. So, anyway, Cone went 7. McDowell blew everything up with giving up 4 runs. Terry Leach there. Storm Davis, Cadwell came in for the 7th, got the win. Honeycutt in the 8th, Eckersley in the 9th. So, Oakland splits in New York, and now we had to head to Oakland. And I know Glenn Hubbard was not the second baseman, so it was Tony Phillips. Because Phillips has done decently in the first few games. So anyway, that's what we gotta do here. Make sure everything happens. Lenny Dexter can be DH, that's fine. Gotta make all the adjustments. In game 3, the Mets. Oops, we can't do that. I forgot to change the pitchers. It's Darling versus Welsh. So yeah, I forgot to change pitchers. You have. And the A's win game 3-2. The Mets scored early, and then Steinbach hits an RBI triple to score Canseco. And then Kevin McReynolds single to make it 2-1. Tony Phillips with an infield single, 2-2 tie. Dave Henderson went deep in the 6th. And that was it. Eck came in to pitch. Elster got hit by pitch. Dykstra sacrificed punt. Backman flew out. Strawberry was given a free ball to get to Kevin McReynolds, and it worked. Strike 3 game set match for the A's. You see there, Welsh 7 innings, Cadwell the 8th, Eck the 9th. And then Ron Darling pitched all 8 innings. I'm surprised they didn't go with another relief pitcher. Anyway, Oakland, remember, 3-man rotation. So Stewart comes back. Mets have to go back with Dr. K. Dwight Gooden. And the Mets come back to win 7-3. So it's 2-2 now. Early on, Keith Hernandez went deep in the 3rd. Mark McGuire singled to score his Bash brother Canseco. And then the 5th inning was huge. Dykstra grounded through the hold score Carter. Backman hit a double to score Elster. Dykstra Strawberry singled to score Backman. And Stewart threw a massive wild pitch. Surprised he didn't get taken out of the inning because he gave up 5 that inning. So I'm not sure what to think about it. All that. Anyway, the A's do score Javier and Canseco both with RBIs to make it 6-3. So anyway, a 7 for Hernandez scored an RBI single to make it 7-3. A's did nothing of their sort, and the Mets have forced at least a game 6. Stewart went 8 innings and then gave it to Cataract. Good in 6 innings for the win. McDowell and Leach did well in relief. So on to the pitching matchup. Cone and Stormy Davis one more time. And the A's win 5-2, 3-2. So the Mets have to go home down 3-2. Strawberry did go deep to make it 2-0, which was big, but Carney Lansford grounded out to make it 2-1. So that was there. Then it was 3-2 after a pair of RBIs. Parker single and Javier single. Although it could have been more as McGuire got thrown out at the plate, which was a rarity. But hey, whatever happens, happens. So we got that. And then Dave Henderson and Mark McGuire with RBI singles themselves to score Phillips and Canseco. 5-2, Eckersley came in the pitch. Hernandez singled. Carter flew out. Elster singled first and third. Dykstra strikes out, and so does Backman. So Eck does his job. Davis went 8 innings, and then Eck. Cone pitched 7 for McDowell came in for the 8th. So anyway, back to New York, 3-2. And again, it tells me Hubbard's at second base, but no, it's Phillips. And besides, Tony Phillips is having a very decent World Series. So why can't we put him in? Bob Welsh will pitch game 6, and that means Darling pitches game 6 for the Mets. Here we go. And that's it. The A's win in extra innings 7-4. They won the series. They took it all. Kevin Elster went deep 1-0. He's not known for his home run power, I think. So it was 1-0 for the longest time until the 9th. McGuire singles. Steinbach grounded out, but they got McGuire at second. Steinbach beat at the throw, so he was at first. Started Javier doubled to make it second and third. Walt Weiss struck out, so all they needed was one more out. Luis Polonia came in and walked, and then Carney Lansbury hits a single to score Steinbach. Strawberry has a bad throw. Javier came in to score. So that meant it was 2-1. And then Tony Phillips came in after Roger McDowell came in to pitch and grounded a 2-run single to score Polonia and Lansbury. So, yeah, it was good to see Tony Phillips. So the A's were up 4-1, and it looks pretty decent for them as we look at things. And then the Mets came in. Eckersley came in to pitch. Carter walked. Elston flew out. Greg Jeffries came in to pinch hit and flew out. So it was over, right? Wrong. Backman hit a double to score Carter. Strawberry doubled to score Backman, and it was 4-3. And then McReynolds singled to score Strawberry. But McReynolds got greedy and got thrown out at second base, trying to stretch the single into a double. So that meant we go to extras. And in extras, Oakland and the Mets couldn't do anything in the 10th. In the 11th, Javier singled. Walt Weiss grounded through the hole for a single to make it first and third. Dave Parker came in to pinch hit, grounded out. Nobody moved. Well, second and third. Lansbury singled to score Javier. Phillips singled to score Weiss. Canseco flew out for a sac fly to score Lansbury. Nothing else happened for the A's of 7-4. So anyway, that's what happened. And then the Mets, Eric Plum came in for the save. Elster flew out. Magadan came in to pinch hit. Grounded out, and Wally Backman also grounded out. So that meant the A's would win the series in 6 and keep their dynasty alive because it is the Oakland A's. Terry Leach with the loss after Darling and McDowell. They should have just taken out Darling for McDowell for the save situation, but they left him too long. David Cohn pitched the final out in the 11th. Welsh went 7, Cataract, Dave Eckersley with a rare blown save. Rick Honeycutt won the game in the 10th, and Plunk saved in the 11th. So the New York Mets would have been screwed 8 ways from Sunday. And I'm sorry, Jim and Eddie, but that's the way it goes. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.